This happened back in the summer of 2019. My first season as a fire lookout in the Cascades. I'd taken the job because I wanted to be alone for a while. I was 30, between things, and a ranger station buddy told me the Forest Service was short-staffed that year and would take almost anyone who could pass the physical. My tower sat on a ridge about 6 miles from the nearest trailhead. No road access, just a foot trail that switchbacked up through old burn scar. Supply drops came once every 2 weeks by mule train. I had a radio, a propane stove, a cot, and about 400 paperbacks left behind by lookouts before me. The days were long and hot and quiet. I liked it. I'd wake up, log the weather, glass the horizon for smoke, read, sleep, repeat. At the time, it felt like exactly what I needed. I had no idea what was waiting for me up there. The routine settled in fast. Every morning I'd run through the weather log, check wind direction, scan the ridgelines through binoculars for any hint of smoke on the horizon. The days had a rhythm to them that I found genuinely comforting, the kind of stillness most people never get close to. By the end of the second week, I knew the sight lines by heart, knew which peaks caught the afternoon haze first, knew exactly how the light moved across the basin below as the sun dropped. Evenings I'd read by the desk lamp until my eyes gave out. I was sleeping better than I had in years. The tower creaked sometimes when the wind picked up, the metal expanding and contracting with the temperature. Normal sounds, building sounds. I told myself I understood every one of them. I was wrong about that. About 3 weeks in, I started hearing something at night. Not every night, maybe every third or fourth. A kind of tapping on the metal stairs that wound up to the catwalk around the tower, 30 feet off the ground. 3 taps, then nothing. Just 3, and then silence that somehow felt heavier than the silence before it. I'd lie there waiting for more and nothing would come. I told myself it was the wind catching a loose bolt, or a pack rat, or the metal contracting as it cooled after a hot day. Lookout towers make a lot of noise once the sun goes down. The expansion and contraction alone can sound like footsteps if you're in the right frame of mind, or the wrong one. I didn't think much of it. Not yet. I didn't want to be the kind of person who made something out of nothing 6 miles from the nearest human being. What I remember most about those early nights is how deliberate I was about staying calm. I'd hear the tapping, I'd lie there, I'd run through the list of explanations, and then I'd tell myself to go back to sleep. And mostly I could. That's what I keep coming back to now. How easily I talked myself out of it in the beginning. There's something about being that isolated that changes the way you process information. You start editing things out automatically because there's no one to share the weight of them with, and unshared fear has a way of feeling optional, like something you can just choose not to carry. So I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the tower settle, telling myself it was nothing, and eventually I'd drift off. And in the morning the sunlight would come through the windows and it would feel like nothing. Until the next night. Then one night in early July it got specific. I woke up around 1 a.m. to the tapping again. Except this time it didn't stop after 3. It kept going slow and even, like someone climbing one step at a time and pausing on each one. I lay there in the dark counting them. 1, 2, a long pause. 3, another pause. I got to 11 before I made myself get up and look out the window. There was nothing on the stairs. No moon that night, so I couldn't see much past the first landing. But I had a headlamp and I didn't want to use it. I don't know exactly why. Maybe because turning it on would have made the situation feel real in a way I wasn't ready for. I told myself I'd imagine the count, that it was just wind moving through the stair rails, which does make a kind of clanking rhythm if it gets going right. I went back to bed. I didn't sleep for a long time. A few nights after that, I heard it again. but closer. Not on the stairs this time. On the catwalk itself, right outside the window by my cot. Same pattern. 3 taps, a pause, and then slow and deliberate, working its way around the perimeter of the tower. I remember lying completely still, not moving, barely breathing, telling myself that a raccoon or a porcupine could easily be up there, that animals climb towers looking for food smell, that I'd read about it happening to other lookouts. My rational mind kept generating explanations, and I kept accepting them because the alternative was too much to sit with alone. I didn't call it in on the radio. What would I even say? Something's walking on my catwalk. They'd have laughed at me, or worse, thought I couldn't hack the isolation and pulled me off the mountain. So I stayed quiet, and the sound kept making its way around the outside of the tower, slow and patient, all the way back to where it started. Kept happening through the rest of July. Never every night, always unpredictable, which somehow made it worse than if it had been constant. A pattern you can brace for is manageable. This wasn't a pattern. It was random enough that I never knew which nights to dread and which ones to trust, and that uncertainty started wearing on me in ways I didn't fully recognize at the time. I started sleeping with the headlamp in my hand. Not on, just there, fingers wrapped around it, like that was enough. I started leaving the radio on low, just for the static. Just to hear something that wasn't the tower, that wasn't the dark, that wasn't whatever was out there deciding when to come back. The static felt like company. I know how that sounds, but 6 miles from the nearest person, alone on a ridge, with something circling your catwalk 3 nights a week, you take whatever comfort you can find. The night it peaked was August 2nd. I remember the date because I'd logged a lightning strike earlier that evening. A dry storm rolling through with no rain behind it, the kind lookouts dread because it starts fires without putting anything out. The sky had been cracking open all evening, light without sound at first, then the sound catching up, that rolling boom through the ridgelines. I was still awake around midnight, too wired from the storm to sleep, watching the horizon for any orange glow that would mean something had ignited in the dark out there. The whole sky felt wrong that night, charged and restless, and then underneath all of it, underneath the residual tension of the lightning and the silence that followed it, the tapping started again on the stairs. I counted without meaning to. 11 steps, same as before. And then it stopped at the landing just below the catwalk. And then, for the first time, I heard something new. Breathing. Slow, deliberate, right outside the door. Not the wind. I know what wind sounds like through those gaps and cracks. This was rhythmic in the wrong way. The way a living thing breathes when it's standing still and waiting. I didn't move. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that my legs went numb from the position I'd locked myself into on the cot. Long enough that the sound stopped feeling new and started feeling inevitable, like it had always been building toward this moment from the very first tap 3 weeks ago. I kept telling myself to pick up the radio. I kept not doing it. There was a part of me that understood, on some level I couldn't fully articulate, that making a sound in that moment would change something. That the silence was the only thing holding the situation where it was. So I held it. I sat completely still in the dark, and I listened to whatever was on the other side of that door breathe. Then something pressed against the door. Not a knock. More like a hand, or something shaped like a hand. Flattening against the wood and pushing, slowly testing the give. The door held. It was locked. A simple bolt I'd started throwing every night almost without thinking about it. And I have never been more grateful for a habit in my life. But I heard the frame creak under the pressure. A low, slow groan of wood being tested from the outside. And underneath that, still the breathing. Unhurried, patient. Like whatever was out there had no particular urgency about any of this. like it had all the time it needed. I remember thinking very clearly in the middle of all of it, I am 30 feet off the ground. There is nothing up here. There is no reason for anything to be up here. And then the pressure released. Just like that, the creaking stopped. The breathing stopped. And the silence that followed was the worst silence I have ever sat inside. No footsteps retreating. No sound of descent on the stairs. Nothing. It was just gone, the way a sound is gone when you're not sure if it stopped or if you simply stopped being able to hear it. I sat with my back against the door until the sky through the window began to pale. First gray, then a thin cold blue that I watched the entire time, waiting for it. When the light was enough that I could see the tree line below, I finally moved. I radioed the district office at first light, and I know I'll get some grief for waiting that long, but in the moment, waiting for the sun was the only decision that felt survivable. I sat on that floor for hours with my legs gone to pins and needles, and I watched the darkness outside the window become morning, and I didn't make a single sound until it did. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes after a night like that. Not sleepiness, something deeper than that. Stairs, the catwalk, the ground around the tower base. No footprints in the dust, which there should have been, since it hadn't rained in weeks. No scat, no tracks, nothing that would explain an animal. One of the rangers, an older guy who'd worked that district for 20 years, got quiet when I described the 11 steps and the breathing. He didn't say much, just told me that some lookouts before me had asked to be reassigned mid-season, and left it at that. I finished out the summer, but I moved my cot to the far side of the room, away from the door, and I never did figure out what it was, or why it stopped that one time and never came back. I still think about those 11 steps. Why 11? Why it always paused there? I haven't taken a lookout job since. I don't think I will again. Some questions don't have answers that make anything better. It was the fall of 2021. My second season on a lookout in northern Idaho, right at the tail end of fire season when most of the other towers had already been closed down for the year. I was 30, single, and I'd requested the extended assignment on purpose. I wanted the quiet. The forest was still by that point. Most of the seasonal crews already gone home. The long summer finally winding down into cold nights and the smell of pine and frost in the mornings. My tower sat on a lower ridge than most, closer to an old logging road that hadn't been maintained in years but was technically still passable on foot. The propane heater ran most evenings. I had my books, my radio schedule, my sight lines. Everything felt contained and manageable in those first days, the way it always does at the start of a posting, before you understand what you've actually moved into. About a week into October, I started noticing a light. Not every night, just now and then, far down the ridge where the logging road curved out of sight into the trees. A single point of light, like a flashlight, moving slow. The first time I saw it, I watched it for maybe 10 minutes before it went out. I told myself it was probably a hunter, since bow season was still open, and hunters do sometimes camp rough out that way even though they're not supposed to be that close to an active lookout. It was a reasonable explanation, and I accepted it without too much trouble. Lookouts see lights all the time that turn out to be nothing. A vehicle on a road you didn't know was there. A ranger on a late patrol. A camper who didn't know where the boundaries were. Single lights in the dark are not, on their own, anything to call in. So I watched it go out and I went to bed. The light kept showing up, though, always around the same time. A little after 9 p.m., always in the same stretch of road, always moving in that same slow, purposeless drift that never seemed to be going toward anything. No camp appeared down there. No vehicle sound in the mornings. No gunshots the next day the way you'd expect from a hunter actually working the area. It would move along that same quarter-mile of road for maybe 20 minutes and then simply go out, like someone had switched it off, and the darkness below would close back over like water. I started watching for it deliberately around 9 each night, which I recognized even then as a thing I probably shouldn't be doing, giving it that kind of attention. But I watched for it anyway, and it kept coming, and it never did anything that explained itself. The first real escalation happened about 10 days later. I heard a vehicle on the logging road, an actual engine, which surprised me because the road had washouts that should have stopped most trucks. It was a low, rough idle, the kind you feel in your chest more than you hear it, and it was somewhere below the tree line, somewhere I couldn't see from the windows. It ran for a long time, at least 20 minutes by my watch, engine going the whole time. I kept waiting for a door to open, for footsteps, for some sound that would place a person attached to that vehicle. Nothing came. Then the engine cut off, and the silence that followed was so complete that I started to genuinely wonder whether I'd imagined the whole thing. I hadn't, but the silence was so total and went on so long that the certainty I'd had 30 seconds earlier started to feel unsteady. I turned the heater down and listened until past 2 a.m. Nothing moved below that ridge. 2 nights after that, I found my propane tank valve turned off. I woke up cold around 3 a.m. The heater had gone out, and when I checked the valve it was closed all the way down. I hadn't touched it. I always left it open overnight. It was part of my routine going back to my first posting, and I was careful about it because being cold in the middle of the night at altitude is not a minor inconvenience. I turned it back on and sat on the edge of the cot for a long time afterward trying to figure out how it had happened. I went through the possibilities methodically. Could I have bumped it in my sleep? Unlikely. The tank was outside the main room on the exterior platform. Could it have worked itself loose? Propane valves don't close on their own. That's not how they work. I didn't have an explanation that held. So I wrote it down in the log and I didn't call it in, and I didn't sleep again the rest of that night. The following week, someone knocked on the door. Not tapped, knocked. Firm, and even 3 times a little before 11 p.m. I asked who was there. Nothing. I asked again, louder this time. Nothing. I stood in the middle of that room for a full minute, not moving, just listening to whatever was on the other side of the door not answering. Then I walked to the window, not the door, and tried to see the landing from an angle. I couldn't get a clear view. I had no way of knowing if someone was still there or had gone. I remember standing with my hand on the radio mic, thinking through exactly what I would say if I picked it up, and hearing in my own head how it would sound. A knock on the door. No voice, no threat, nobody visible. I knew how that played to a district coordinator at 11 at night. I knew what it could cost me, so I put the mic down. I turned the lights off, and I sat in the dark and watched the door until morning. I want to be clear about something because I've thought about this a lot since. The decision not to call wasn't about being brave. It wasn't about toughing it out or proving something to myself. It was about fear of a different kind, the fear of being pulled, of losing the posting, of being the lookout who couldn't handle the isolation. And that fear, the professional fear, kept winning over the other kind, right up until it couldn't anymore. In the nights that followed that knock, I kept the radio close. I ran through what I would say in my head over and over, rehearsing it, refining it, never actually making the call. I told myself I needed something more concrete, something I could describe without sounding like I was falling apart. So I waited. I sat in the dark with my hand on that radio night after night, and the logging road below stayed quiet, and the valve stayed open, and I almost convinced myself the worst of it was over. I was wrong. The peak of it came 4 nights later. I woke to the sound of someone on the stairs. Real footsteps this time, heavy, deliberate, coming up from below. I looked, and this time there was a shape. A man standing on the landing just below the catwalk, not moving, just standing there in the dark facing the tower. He wasn't trying to hide. He wasn't making any noise. He was just there, the way you stand when you've arrived somewhere and you're in no hurry about what comes next. I couldn't make out a face. The darkness was too deep and he was too still, and my eyes kept trying to resolve details that weren't there. I yelled out, asked what he wanted, told him this was an active lookout station. He didn't answer, didn't move. For what felt like a full minute we held that position, him on the landing, me at the window, and then something shifted and he simply turned and started walking back down. He walked down the stairs slowly, unhurried, in exactly the way that made it worse. No panic, no retreat, just a deliberate descent like he'd gotten whatever he came for. I listened to every step. I counted them the way you count when you need something to hold on to. When I heard him reach the ground, I pressed close to the window and watched him cross the base of the tower and move toward the tree line without looking back. He walked into the trees and the darkness took him, and that was it. No sound after that. No engine on the road, no light. Just the forest closing back over. I stood at that window for a long time after he disappeared, waiting for him to come back or for some sound that would tell me where he'd gone. Nothing came, and somehow that was worse than anything he'd actually done. The complete absence of him, with no explanation of why he'd been there at all or whether he intended to come back. I called it in the second the sound of his footsteps was gone. 2 officers made the drive up the old road at first light, as far as the washouts allowed, then hiked the rest. They found tire tracks from a truck. Old, could have been from that night or from weeks before, no way to tell on that kind of ground. No footprints near the tower base, though the ground there was mostly rock. They asked if I could describe him. Couldn't, not really. Just a shape, a build. Nothing that would put a face to it. They pulled the tower's registration and found that the land below had a history. An old logging camp that shut down in the 80s after some kind of dispute that nobody in the office could fully explain. They told me that the way you tell someone something you don't really want to examine too closely, like a footnote, like something that probably didn't mean anything. I didn't ask follow-up questions. I'm not sure I want. After that night, I barred the door every evening before dark. It became the first thing I did when the light started going, before the heater, before the log, before anything else. I braced it with the heaviest thing I had and I checked it twice, and then I sat and watched the road until I couldn't keep my eyes open. The last 2 weeks of the posting passed without the man coming back. The light on the logging road didn't return either. And I want to tell you that the absence of those things was a relief, that I slept better, that the remaining nights felt manageable. But the truth is that the silence bothered me almost as much as the activity had. Because silence isn't an explanation. It's just absence. An absence out there, alone on that ridge with the forest pressing in on every side, has a weight to it that doesn't lift just because the thing making the sound has stopped. I finished the last 2 weeks of the season and came off the mountain on a gray November morning, and I drove home without stopping, and I didn't talk about what had happened for a long time. I still don't know who he was. I don't know why he was standing on those stairs at that hour, in that place, with no explanation and no demand and no apparent destination. I don't know if the light on the road and the valve and the engine and the man were all connected, or if they were separate things that just happened to stack up against each other in the worst possible order. What I know is that he stood on that landing and looked at the tower and then walked away unhurried into the dark. And I never saw him again, and that non-ending has never fully resolved itself in my mind the way endings are supposed to. I don't camp alone anymore. not even in my own backyard, and I don't think that will change. I want to say up front that I don't expect anyone to fully believe this one, because I still don't fully believe it myself, and I was there. This was the summer before last. My third season as a lookout, this time on a tower in the Sierra Nevada that had a bit of a reputation among the seasonal crew, though nobody would say exactly why when I asked. I was 30. It was my longest posting yet. 10 weeks straight with only one resupply halfway through, and I'd been genuinely looking forward to the solitude. I was experienced enough by then that I thought I knew what isolated felt like. Thought I understood the particular psychology of it, the way the silence expands to fill everything and you just have to let it. The tower sat above a dry, rocky basin. Sparse pine, pale stone, not much undergrowth, and sound carried strangely out there, echoing off the rock in ways that made distances hard to judge. I would think about that a lot later. The first few weeks were normal. Hot days, the kind of stillness that makes you hyper-aware of your own heartbeat by week 2. I ran my logs, I watched my sight lines, I read through the small library of paperbacks in the cabinet by the cot. Then, right around the start of July, I started hearing something at the base of the tower most nights. A scraping sound, slow and rhythmic like something dragging across the rock. The first time I heard it, I went to the window and looked down at the base of the support structure. But the angle was wrong and the darkness was heavy and I couldn't see anything that explained it. I told myself it was probably a fallen branch caught on something, moving with the wind, even though the nights were mostly windless. I didn't want to think too hard about it. You get like that out there. You start rationing your own fear because there's nobody to share it with and no way to burn it off. The scraping went on for about 2 weeks. Same time most nights, right around midnight, always lasting close to 10 minutes and then stopping abruptly. I got used to it the way you get used to things when you're alone and the alternative is panic. I'd hear it start, I'd lie still, I'd wait for it to stop, and then I'd go back to whatever I was doing. Then it changed. One night the scraping stopped early, after maybe 30 seconds, and was replaced by something else. A low, steady humming, almost like a voice, but with no words I could make out, no melody, no variation in pitch. Just a sustained tone coming from directly beneath the tower floor, 30 feet below where I was lying. I remember going completely still on the cot. I remember the feeling of the floorboards under me as if something on the other side of them had suddenly become very present. I told myself it was the wind through the support beams. I had never heard wind do anything like that before or since. I should say here that I didn't call anyone about any of this for almost 3 weeks. I know exactly how that sounds. I've thought about it a lot and I still don't have a defense for it that fully satisfies me. The nearest ranger station was a half-day hike in either direction. My radio only worked for scheduled check-ins and genuine emergencies, and I kept telling myself that a scraping sound and a hum weren't an emergency, that I'd sound unstable reporting it, that this posting already had a reputation I didn't fully understand and I didn't want to be the one who confirmed whatever story was attached to it. So I sat with it. Night after night, I sat at that small table with the radio right there within reach and I did not pick it up. I logged my weather readings. I ate my meals. I read my books. And every night around midnight, I lay on that cot and listened to whatever was underneath me do what it did and tried to convince myself it didn't require a response. The escalation, when it came, happened fast. It was a night in late July, no moon, the dark, the kind of dense that makes the inside of your eyelids feel the same as the room around you. I'd been asleep for maybe 2 hours when I woke to 3 sharp knocks on the floor beneath my cot. From underneath. From the open air below the tower, 30 feet off the ground, where there was nothing but support structure and darkness and bare rock far below. I sat up, My heart was going in a way that made thinking difficult. 10 seconds later, 3 more knocks. Harder this time. Closer, somehow, even though the floor hadn't changed. I counted the seconds between them, and they were evenly spaced in a way that had nothing to do with accident. Nothing to do with wind or branch or any explanation I had left. Then a pause of maybe a full minute. And then the entire tower shuddered. Not swayed, shuddered. A single hard jolt through the support structure, like something had struck one of the legs with real force. I felt towers move in wind before, that slow lateral sway that settles back and repeats. This was one impact, concentrated, deliberate, and then stillness. The kind of stillness that follows something that knows it has your attention. I sat on the cot and did not move for a long moment. The tower had stopped vibrating. The night outside the windows was completely dark and completely silent. And then I heard, very faintly, from below, the humming again. The same tone I'd been hearing for weeks. Except now it felt less like an ambient sound and more like a signal. Like something telling me it was still there, had always been there, would keep being there regardless of what I did next. I picked up the headlamp. I didn't turn it on yet. I just held it. The same way Cole had held his. I didn't know that then, but I understand it now. I grabbed my headlamp and moved to the floor grate. There's a section of the tower floor made of open metal grating that gives a partial view straight down through the support structure to the ground. It's there for checking equipment, for ventilation, it's just a feature of the design. I'd looked through it 100 times in daylight. Looking through it at night with a headlamp is a different experience entirely. The beam cut down through the haze, through the lattice of support beams, toward the rock far below. The circle of light it made on the ground was small and uneven. I moved it slowly. I was looking for the branch, the animal. The thing I'd been promising myself was down there for 3 weeks. I needed to see it and name it and be done with it. I moved the beam across the rock, left to right, slowly, and then something at the edge of the light moved. Pale, low to the ground, fast. Faster than I expected, faster than anything I'd prepared myself for. It crossed the edge of the headlamp beam and was gone into the treeline before I could hold it in my sight long enough to understand what I was looking at. I can tell you what it wasn't. It wasn't a bear. The movement was wrong, too low and too quick. Nothing like the lumbering roll of a bear at speed. It wasn't a deer, wasn't any large animal I recognized from that region. It was pale in a way that read wrong against the dark rock. And it moved in a way that I have never been able to map onto anything I know. I stayed at the grate for a long time after it disappeared, holding the headlamp on the treeline, waiting for it to come back into the light. Didn't. The trees were still. The rock below was empty. The only sound was my own breathing, loud and uneven, in a room that was otherwise completely silent. I didn't sleep after that. Around 4 a.m., the knocking started again. This time on the trapdoor in the floor, the one leading down to the first landing, which I always kept latched from inside. 3 knocks, clean and firm, from directly below. Then a pause. Then 3 more. Then the latch itself rattled. A sharp, mechanical sound, metal against metal, like something was working at it from below with deliberate, patient attention. I want to be precise about this. The trapdoor is 15 feet off the first landing. To reach it from below, something would need to be on that first landing, or on the support structure itself, clinging to the underside of the floor. I didn't let myself think through the geometry of it at the time. I just moved. I got off the cot, I put my weight on that trapdoor, I pressed my back down against it, and I held it. And I held it. And I held it until the light came. The latch kept rattling beneath me, on and off, for what I think was close to an hour. Not constantly. It would go quiet for 5 or 10 minutes and then start again, like something was resting between attempts, or like it was in no particular hurry. Each time it started again, I pressed down harder, which I understood rationally was probably not doing anything given the construction of the trapdoor, but there was nothing rational about what I was doing. I was just a person with their back against a door, in the dark, alone, at altitude, waiting for dawn. At some point, the rattling stopped for the last time and didn't resume. I don't know exactly when. I'd lost track of time in any real sense. I just know that at some point I became aware that the only sound was the early birds starting outside, and the light through the window had shifted from black to the beginning of gray. I didn't move until I could see clearly. I sat on that trapdoor until the room was fully light. I radioed it in the moment my scheduled check-in window opened, and I told them everything, including how long I'd waited to report any of it, because at that point I genuinely did not care how it sounded. 2 rangers made the hike out that same day. They checked the support structure, the trapdoor latch, the ground below. The latch showed fresh scoring on the metal. Deep marks, the kind that take real force and repeated contact to leave. And one of the rangers said, without me asking, that it looked deliberate rather than accidental. Not weathering, not rust damage. Deliberate. They couldn't find animal tracks that matched anything they recognized in the region. They had no explanation for the shudder I described. And then one of them, almost as an aside, mentioned that the tower had been temporarily decommissioned once before, years back, after a previous lookout had requested early relief and refused to say why. He said it the way you say something you think is probably relevant but can't quite bring yourself to fully commit to. They offered to pull me off the mountain early. I said no, which, in hindsight, was probably pride more than good judgment, but I finished the season. The knocking came back 4 or 5 more times before the posting ended. Always the same, 3 knocks, a pause, then the shudder through the support legs. But it never got past the trapdoor again. Whether that means something or means nothing, I genuinely cannot tell you. I finished my weeks, I came down the mountain, and I drove home in a way that felt different from every other time I'd left a posting. Like I was leaving something unresolved in a way I'd never be able to go back and finish. I haven't taken a night posting since. I sleep with a light on in the hallway now, in my own house, in a city, on the 4th floor of a building surrounded by other people. I know how that sounds. I don't have a better explanation to offer. I just know what was under that tower, whatever it was patient. And patient things, in my experience, don't really stop. They just wait.